because we didn't really know that much about Prevost. It was not filled with, yes, we got our guy, which of course can really color your reaction. It was a very sort of raw take. Who is this man? What is he doing? And what is he signaling from the loggia? So far, it's been good and positive. The fact that it was Cardinal Prevost, that there's no rose-colored glasses, there weren't high expectations, and I want to set that up to what I want to say next, which is something I heard over and over again, and that is, peace has returned to Rome. Now, you can take that however you want.
And will he do the things that need to be done? Or are we just going to move forward and just forget about the last 12 years? How do you see that?
Even if this is the man that God has chosen, people were saying, is he going to condemn Vatican II? Is he going to condemn the new? Of course not. Of course not.
By the way, my name is Joe McClane. I host a radio program called A Catholic Take, where we look at the world through a Catholic lens. I'd love for you to hang out with us. If you like it, give it a thumbs up and let us know what you think in the comments below.
Will the new Pope heal old wounds? At remnantnewspaper.com, Michael Matt from the Remnant joins us this morning by phone. Good morning to you, Michael. Thank you for your time.
Good morning, Joe. Thanks for having me.
Good to have you on. So, all right, you just fresh off the airplane from Rome. Praise be to God. What were your general impressions and thoughts while you were there? What was the energy? What was the atmosphere? It seemed like a new day for the church and for Rome.
Well, I think maybe the best way to answer that would be, let's say, for example, we had gotten a Pope Cardinal, Cardinal Burke or a Cardinal Muller. You might immediately begin sugarcoating your response or, looking at what happened or the impressions through that sort of unbelievable prism. But so I think that the fact that it was Cardinal Prevost kind of could assure your readers that there's no rose-colored glasses, there weren't high expectations, and I want to set that up to what I want to say next, which is something I heard over and over again, or use that to set up what I want to say next, and that is, peace has returned to Rome. Now, you can take that however you want, but I'm talking about old-time insider, Vaticanista-type guys, men and women in Rome, who kept, just smiling ear to ear, not because they thought they had a conservative on the throne, but because this sort of climate of fear had gotten to such an extent, but just the change in attitude. So we have to look at the theology of the two men, Francis versus Prevost, obviously, or versus Leo. But it is interesting early on, everyone keeps saying that there seems to be something has lifted. There's peace in Rome. It's sort of a serious, in a good sense, situation again in Rome vis-a-vis the Pope. So I thought that was a very kind of a hopeful thing. And as the week went on, the 10 days that we were over there, as it went on, more and more people began to think, hey, I wonder if this is going to be a little different. And so it was going in the right direction.
Were you surprised when they announced his name?
I was, yeah, of course. I mean, I didn't have him in my top 5, top 10, but I think I was pleasantly surprised because we were all holding our breath for a Togli or a Caroline, and that didn't happen. So I think that what could have been certainly was what we were most concerned about, and that didn't happen. So then you had to sort of start with a clean slate, and I rather enjoyed covering it with a clean slate because you really had to do some homework, dig in, don't just jump on what everybody else was already saying about a very popular candidate who everybody kind of thought might. No, that's really not the case. He was unknown to all the journalists there at first. We had to get busy and find out what we thought. And boy, I tell you what, if first impressions mean anything, and you'll remember all of us were I was at the last conclave as well, and all of us were really, really concerned about what happened on the loggia. So just for consistency's sake, if we're going to read anything into what happens on the loggia when the Pope makes his first appearance, we have to, in fairness, say it was in marked contrast. Pope Leo was in marked contrast to what we saw with the previous pontificate, and contrast it for the better. It was a completely different experience, and one that was filled with joy and hope and expectation. And I don't think at all, because as I said to begin with, because we didn't really know that much about Prevost, it was not filled with, yes, we got our guy, which of course can really color your reaction. It was a very, very sort of raw take. Who is this man? What is he doing? And what is he signaling from the loggia and for the first few days of his pontificate? So far, it's been good. It's been positive.
My first reaction was crazy. I really thought this was a bad thing. And admittedly, it was an overreaction, to be sure, but because I had discussed Prevost with some folks before the conclave, and they thought that would be a bad thing if he stepped out. So I was pretty shocked when his name was mentioned. I've scaled that back quite a bit. I have cautious hope hope now, I think is the way to put it. Cautious hope. Praise be to God. We're happy for the great things that we're seeing. We want more. But I think there's still some reservations in the sense that will he be able to, and will he do the things that need to be done? Or are we just going to move forward and just forget about the last 12 years? How do you see that?
Well, we had quite a run in Rome with reactions because we had millions of views. There were a lot of people wanting to know what was going on all around the world. And I found that my biggest struggle in presenting my commentary on what was going on was as a traditionalist. I've been a traditionalist all my life. So when you say something positive about the new pope, many people who have not been in this fight as long thought I was saying, hey, man, Pius X is here. It's over. The revolution is over. And of course that's not true. So those of us who've been in this game for this fight for a long, long time, we're looking for something on a much smaller level. We're looking for some indication of sincerity. Remember, I covered this man at the Synod on Synodality. In fact, I'm going to be dropping a video this weekend on what he was actually saying during the Synod on Synodality, Cardinal Prevost, which was also in marked difference than what some of the crazy stuff that was also going on at that Synod. So I think that's the big distinction. We're an enemy, to a large degree now, this revolution is going on so long. We're all behind enemy lines. This is occupied territory. So nobody is saying this is the answer. God has rescued the church for sure. It's over. Even if this is the man that God has chosen to lead back in a little bit more sane direction, I expect it to take a long time. I expect, people were saying, is he going to condemn Vatican II? Is he going to condemn the new? Of course not. Of course not. We're just not there yet. But there are some signs that I think, especially over the past 12 years, that Cardinal Prevost has seen the church really fall into disarray. And so I don't think you have to be a Pope Pius XIII or a saintly pope or a sainted pope to say, okay, something has to change here. The church is really, really in trouble. And that seems to me to be what he's saying. Now, maybe he's going to say, I'm going to do synodality in a better way. I've already run some video of him talking about synodality, and having been at the Synod on Synodality, I know that one of the main things was the ordination of women. That's what they were shooting for. Cardinal Prevost completely shoots it down, and using the accompaniment and the walkways and pathways, using the language of the Synod, he nevertheless was in marked contrast to everybody else and shoots down the idea of women ordination. So I think, as I say, there's reason to hope. What we're looking for is just a little bit of breathing room for people to not be under this sort of a reign of terror, especially for the traditional Latin Mass folks. There's no reason to believe that Pope Leo will continue that sort of crackdown on the Mass. I really would be shocked if that personality was interested in that at all. So I think we just got to keep everything in perspective, keep praying. Yes, of course, Catholic hope. I don't have any time for the people that wanted to go in there and just shoot this thing down before it even got started. I think that's really counterproductive. We all have to be in the discussions now, be in the dialogue, if you will, with the new Pope to try to get him interested in sort of looking after us and listening to us as traditional Catholics as well right now. So coming out guns a-blazing to me made no sense, and I was quite adamant about that in Rome.
Yeah. Okay, so I was very encouraged, and this is part of your article over at The Remnant. I was very encouraged by his conversation with the Eastern churches that are in communion with Rome. He talked about needing to recapture the mystery. And I meant from the Latin Rite perspective, because they seem to hold the mystery of the Divine Liturgy, whereas in the Latin Rite we have let it go so badly. And we need to rekindle that. I found that was incredibly hopeful, didn't you?
Oh, of course. You have to just jump on that, because that's another one of the early signals of how this man, not only what I think we can probably expect from him as a more diplomatic pope, but also what we've seen from the past with his ability to sort of talk to two sides on a tough issue and come a little closer to a consensus. So, yeah, that language about the Eastern rites and the liturgies is extremely encouraging, because how could the man who said that then turn around and say, but in the Latin rite, we don't find this. We find it nothing but disunifying to go with the traditional Latin Mass and to continue that reign of terror. And really, we've seen this. Like, people were saying he's against Trump because of the immigration thing. Well, if you go listen to what he actually said as Cardinal Prevost about immigration, he actually has a very Christian take on it. It's the same exact take as mine. Nobody wants open borders. Nobody wants people coming in here illegally. It's dangerous for everybody, including them. But once they're here, we have to fix. He actually said, we have to fix this massive problem. But those who are already here need to be treated with respect in Christ-like fashion. Well, I certainly agree with that. So that's not an anti-Trump policy. That's what Trump was saying all along, that we're going to deal with this in a humane way. But we fix the big problem. So it seems to me early on with Pope Leo, we can already see his ability to kind of hear both sides and come up with something that's actually constructive to possibly heal rifts and to do. That certainly seems to be what he's proud of as a man of the church, who's served the church all of his life, as a missionary, as a man who clearly has the faith. He seems to be quite eager to get in and to do things like that. I don't like the term because it's been so abused, but to actually build some bridges right now at a time when they've all been blown up. Sounds like kind of a good idea. At least some first baby steps towards a more sane period for the church.
Now, I've interviewed Bishop Schneider and Father Gerald Murray this week on the show, and both seem to agree that at a minimum, we need to see a rolling back of Amoris Laetitia. We need to see a rolling back of Fiducia Supplicans. We need to see a replacement of some of these leaders in the dicasteries because, there are some real issues from the last pontificate that must be addressed. Would you agree that these are must-dos?
Absolutely, especially with the appointments. Everybody's watching. And again, I thought once you get over to Rome and you sort of spend some time and see how things work, you weren't surprised at all that he didn't make adjustments right away to the Curia or start bouncing people out. In fact, I think that's a hopeful sign that he said, let's just wait and pray for a little time here, peace, a little time of prayer, and then we'll make decisions. Well, thank goodness, because that's what was missing from the last one, I'm sorry to say. There was a certain bully and, iron-fisted approach to everything. So I think that, those, as you say, those are extremely important issues and much more important, in my opinion, for at least for the traditional Catholic audience. Again, don't look for him to undo Vatican II. That simply isn't going to happen. This man was formed in the Novus Ordo. So understand what to expect and understand why we are somewhat hopeful, not because we think we have a traditionalist, but because we think we may have a fair-minded man who would then be in a better position to respond to the grace of the Holy Ghost, to hear the cries of his children, us included, about the nightmare that's going on in the church today, and move in a more positive direction. That's the expectation. Not that he's going to make the revolution just go away immediately, but I quite agree with you, especially his appointments. We have to watch that very carefully to see what direction he wants to go here.
Would you say that's the number one thing to watch out for was the appointments? What about like Rupnik? If Rupnik is still a priest a year from now, what should we say about that?
Well, that was Francis's baby. So, we'll see. Because really the main accusation or the main criticism about that was that he was a personal friend of Pope Francis. The order itself did some disciplinary action, but it seemed like Francis was always rolling it back, at least de facto. So, I think that kind of thing is really crucial to look at. What will be his policy? I covered the sex summit in Rome a few years ago. Cardinal Blaise Supich was the spokesman at that point. Nothing ever happened. The sex summit before that was headed up by McCarrick. It's been a joke on that score for a long time. So I would imagine that Pope Leo is going to want to show right away that there's a new sheriff in town when it comes to the sexual abuse problem as well. At least that certainly is the hope and the prayer.
Did you like that video? It's okay. You can admit it. It's perfectly fine. Hey, we cover the big stories of our day, from inside the church to outside the church to all points in between, and we do it from a Catholic perspective. It's called A Catholic Take. It's a radio program Monday through Friday. We live stream it right here on this channel, by the way, so make sure to subscribe, like, and share. We would be very grateful to you. And don't forget, you're going to want to watch this video right here because you don't want to miss anything.